Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. I believe, do we have another person that wishes to join us up here? If not,
I had one question, if I could. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The issue of rodeos and RVTs providing care or having with the veterinarian on call, perhaps, or the relationship of the RVT with a veterinarian. But you made the comment that there needs to be the doctor-patient relationship. But I guess I look at a rodeo as a similar environment to a sporting event, or whenever you have an emergency situation, you're not going to have a patient-doctor relationship existing. And if someone goes to an emergency room with a problem, there's no relationship that's been established there. It's to meet whatever particular emergency situation, medical situation that exists. And so I guess I'm just trying to feel, when you mentioned that, it almost precludes that you couldn't have an RVT, which would be the equivalent of having, rather than a paramedic, an EMT that would be providing emergency medical care to an automobile accident victim. So how, to me, they seem very similar in that case. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Well, I would say I don't know the code sections on the human medical side and the requirements and what the laws are regarding EMTs and what their scope of practice is. But in veterinary medicine, the veterinary client-patient relationship is clearly defined. And if an animal were to come into an emergency clinic or a veterinarian were to go to a rodeo where there was an emergency where an animal was injured, that's when the veterinary client-patient relationship would be established, which involves assessing the animal, physical examination, talking to the owner if they're available, and making a commitment to take on the case with the owner's permission to do whatever that needs to be done. So it is the backbone, essentially, of veterinary medicine, that you have a veterinary client-patient relationship before proceeding with any kind of treatment, which also protects everybody involved.
I guess I'm looking at when you have a rodeo with some type of, I haven't been to a rodeo in 50 years probably, but it's, there is some, an animal gets caught in a fence, an animal gets, trips and is hung up somewhere on a rope that can't get out, and you need someone to be able to untie them in a way that doesn't do more harm than good, that wouldn't require necessarily a patient relationship, but it would require someone with some basic understanding of the physiology of the animal.
When I mentioned that we represent nearly 1,000 RVTs and RVT students, and I asked my staff to go through our database and identify the number of RVTs that, and this is self-reported to our database as their practice type in either equine or large animal. And out of all of our RVT members, there were 12. So I've worked in veterinary medicine for many years, owned practices for many years, a lot of great RVTs, but they were all small animal RVTs. And they knew how to handle dogs and cats and birds and snakes and everything else that came in the door, but they did not work on horses unless they personally had horses and happened to know about them. But in my practice, they did not work on horses. And these are large animals weighing many hundreds of pounds that can certainly injure somebody quite easily. So it's for protection of the animal, but it's for the protection of the people too. And quite honestly, if you're going to put a small animal RVT out there, the cowboys that are there at the rodeo are going to know a lot more about how to take care of those animals as far as getting them off a fence or, that sort of thing.
Very good. Thank you.
It may be helpful to look at the 5 RVT job tasks. This doesn't deal with what you were just discussing, but it sort of does, in that one of the 5 RVT job tasks is to act in an emergency independent, with the instructions of a veterinarian, but to be able to act when a veterinarian is absent in an emergency.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Go ahead.
And I can assure you that there are more than 12 RVTs qualified to work on large animals in the state of California. Many of them are our members.
Thank you.
And I had one, if I could, ask the Veterinary Medical Board a question, if someone would come up, Anna Marie, if you just, I have a question related to the recreating. Thank you very much, everyone, for your testimony. Thank you. I guess what comes to mind is it seems the issue of the RVT, committee before, and then we've had conversations over the last few years about the issue, and it certainly is coming up today again with a little more volume, I think, than we've heard before, or at least recently, with the issues that were created. And it's not just with that I've seen with the Veterinary Medical Board. We've seen it with other professions, a similar type of relationship and maybe tension that may be between the two, and it's our job to make sure that doesn't occur. So what would be the consequences of recreating the RVT committee?
I can speak to it from a resource, the consequences in terms of resources. So right now we have a full veterinary medical board and then a 9-member multidisciplinary advisory committee. And in the past, those two board committees didn't meet at the same time, which kind of created some issues in terms of things that were being addressed at the MDC. That's what we'll call the multidisciplinary advisory committee. It's easier for all of us this afternoon. We're not necessarily being elevated to the VMB and vice versa because they weren't meeting at the same time. So what we tried to do to create some structure around those priorities that were being delegated from the VMB to the MDC is have the MDC meet in conjunction with the VMB. It's a separate day. They meet for a full day, and they are to deal with only those issues being prioritized by the VMB and then reporting back those recommendations. So with that structure in mind, staff is continually preparing for these meetings. It's like having two separate boards per se. One of them is advisory to the other, but it's still the staff preparation time to get all of the information, the materials, the issues are separate in terms of they're not discussing the exact same thing on those 2 days or 3 days sometimes. So it would create, fiscally, it would create an impact for paying for all the travel, the per diem, and then just the time to prepare for 3 meetings 4 times a year, 3 separate boards, so, or committee/boards. So there is that impact. I can't speak to what happened many, many years ago. I can talk about what's happening today. And I can tell you from the last 2.5 years that I've been with the Veterinary Medical Board, many, if not all, of the issues that were on the multidisciplinary advisory committee were related somehow to registered veterinary technicians, whether it was education in terms of looking at alternate route programs and alternate route pathways, whether it was looking at the current accreditation status. And I'd really like to kind of correct the record from the January meeting. There is language in the board's regulation that recognizes accreditation of the American Veterinary Medical Association. And this is not unlike many other regulatory and healing arts professions that recognize accreditation as the form of educational criteria. However, there are some reporting requirements with that accreditation recognition, and those reporting requirements have not been, the board has not been mandating those reporting requirements. And this isn't a decision not to do so. I think it had to do with limited staffing for many, many years. So we're cognizant that we need to require those reports, but we're also with legal counsel looking at whether or not those efforts are duplicative. What we don't want to do is have schools recreate this information both on the accreditation side and on the board approval side. So as long as we can assure the accreditation standards fill in all of those reporting gaps and that there is no risk to the student in terms of the enrollment agreements, the fees that are paid to these programs and what have you, we want to make sure that we're not duplicating those efforts. In terms of whether or not it would elevate RVTC matters more efficiently, I don't think I'm the expert to answer that question. I can say that the MDC has been very focused the last couple of years on such matters, and we will continue to be focused.
Well, what would be helpful is in the, within the 60 days that you have to respond to the background paper, we'd like to see what tangible steps
Yes.
that, can be taken within the current board and the committee structure to address the issues that we've heard today and the ones that have been outlined before. If we can see some tangible steps to move forward with that, because this issue has been going on for a while, and I think, I believe you want to solve it and make sure that everyone gets their voices heard, and we can resolve it. So if you could include that in there, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. Senator Wachowski.
So I've been listening to debate, and I don't believe I heard anything from the veterinarian board about the recommendations about the task force for these rehabilitation folks. And I guess the question is, will there be legislation, or will the board be considering this? Likewise, with the registered technicians, I haven't seen anything that you've said or the board said is that we think it's a good idea, other than the complaints that people said. Am I hearing that right?
You're just talking specifically about the Animal Rehabilitation Task Force, both from the RVT side and the physical therapy folks?
Correct.
So this recommendation is something that we've talked to committee staff about. They've made it clear that they think there is a good reason to do this task force, and the board at its January meeting actually tabled any further discussion until we create this task force. So the board has agreed to do this and would like to move forward very judiciously in terms of identifying who those players are, the stakeholders in this realm of service delivery, if you will. I believe that we will also probably have some committee staff on that task force as well.
Now, on the rodeo issue, because it seems like there's 60 sanctioned rodeos, and there's like 800 amateur backyard rodeos. And the concern, there's information in the background paper that you have data from 2001 that says maybe 1% of these animals are injured, right? So that seems like it may not include all the action from the amateur arena. My concern is that we asked about whether because the penal code's very clear. You can have a veterinarian in, and I heard the board say that's what we want on everyone, or you can have a veterinarian on call within 1 hour. That's the penal code law. Right. So the staff report, at least when I read it, suggested that maybe these registered technicians who know something about what's going on, why don't we move to at least, I assume that they're going to be cheaper than a full-time veterinarian. So the suggestion, again, as I read it, was that perhaps we could move the board towards saying have the technicians at these amateur boards, which is better than nothing, rather than we want a veterinarian and that's what it is. Can you comment on that?
I can. Senator Wachowski, the Veterinary Medical Board has not taken a position on the rodeo issue because it just came out in the staff document in the background, and we haven't had a board meeting from that time. But we would very much like to take a position on that issue and provide it in our written report. I can tell you that it's not, you're right about those numbers not jiving, right? The number of rodeos versus the number of reports we get at the Veterinary Medical Board. But I don't believe that it's a lack of veterinarians failing to report. I believe it's a lack of veterinarians knowing that there have been injuries. And so it kind of speaks to the problem that maybe those animals are not being treated. It's hard for us to tell. You know, it's an interesting kind of quandary because you have the penal code, which the Veterinary Medical Board doesn't necessarily enforce the penal code, but in business and profession code, veterinarians are responsible for reporting rodeo injuries if they treated the animal. So it's hard to say, are those animals not being referred to the veterinarian? The cases that we do know about, those cases that have come before the board as complaints, when we've circled back with the veterinarian and there was treatment, we've always received a report from the veterinarian upon that animal being treated by that person. So it doesn't look like it's a failure to report. It looks like it's really a failure to know that these animals are even injured at the rodeo. And I'm only, this is only suspect because I'm not there at these rodeos. And again, it's kind of a stretch for the board to actually be, I think, overseeing rodeos in and of themselves, but we are overseeing the reporting requirement of the veterinarian. We will definitely weigh in on that area. Thank you.
Thank you. And keeping in tradition with giving Senator Wojciechowski a hard time from this weekend, it's rodeo for folks from urban areas, rodeo from folks that actually have rodeos, and
rodeo is a drive.
And rural areas.
I've actually been invited to the Castro Valley Rodeo. Coming up soon.
It's a drive in Beverly Hills. That's what rodeo.
Thank you, Senator Wojciechowski. With that, let me ask if there's any more additional comments or questions from the dais. Hearing and seeing none. Any other comments from public comments or others? Do we have additional comment? Please.
Good afternoon, good evening, I guess, Chairman Salas and Chairman Hill, committee members and staff. My name is Jane Sykes. I am the Interim Director of the University of California, Davis Veterinary Medical Teaching Hospital. I'm also a Professor of Small Animal Internal Medicine, and I'm Australian, and I say rodeo instead of rodeo. I'd like to actually comment on issue 4, which is university licensure. Should the board license veterinarians employed by veterinary medical schools? And I'm commenting on behalf of the University of California, Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, and also Dr. Ron Terra, who couldn't be here, who has endorsed my comments, which he's read from Western College of Veterinary Medicine down in Southern California. So we strongly support the proposed new licensure language. Our faculty clinicians, interns, and residents who are training to become specialists have to be able to acquire licensure individually in an expedited manner in order for us to maintain the exceptional quality and diversity of our clinical programs while still allowing them to be regulated by the California Veterinary Medical Board. There are a relatively small number of veterinarians with a level of advanced training that is needed to maintain the quality of our clinical programs worldwide, and so it's really essential for us to recruit internationally. If those veterinarians were required to obtain individual licensure through state board examination, this would massively cripple our ability to recruit and retain those individuals and have far-reaching impacts on the quality of our programs. As the level of training of our clinicians is consistently far higher than that of an entry-level veterinarian at the time that they are appointed, and they are exposed to continuing clinical education at a very advanced level on a daily basis in our school and through widespread attendance at continuing education meetings, not only nationally but also worldwide. We support the proposed process for licensure through jurisprudence examination and an educational course on regionally specific diseases and conditions alone, without further need for examination of entry-level knowledge in the discipline of veterinary medicine. So to finish off, I just want to quote our Dean Michael Lairmore on this issue, who noted, as the top-ranked veterinary school in the United States and globally, the proposed change in licensing requirements respects the needs for consumer protection in California and provides a recourse for consumers with complaints while retaining sufficient flexibility for the university to fulfill its mission by recruiting the very best veterinary faculty to educate veterinarians and provide patient care to the citizens of California
through its teaching hospitals and clinical centers. Thank you for your consideration.
For being here. I'm sorry, it is evening, thank you. It is evening. So we'll work our way around that way. Does that work all right for everyone? So yes, sir. Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Salomon Stoop. I'm here today because I lost a dog named Lizzie a few months ago. She was my family. Lizzie died because the Business and Professions Code needs to be updated. She died because the Business and Professions Code needs to be amended to require veterinarians to consistently, and I emphasize consistently, disclose pharmaceutical information about medications, in particular about potential risks, side effects, drug interactions, and long-acting drugs. Consumers need the preventative approach. I know that the veterinary board talks a lot about the disciplinary approach, but consumers need to prevent the damage. After the damage is done, that's different, but we need to prevent the damage. And we need help for that. And we need information for that. When I buy a radio, a calculator, a computer, a watch, I get instructions manuals. And I don't need to even ask for them. When I buy a medicine at the pharmacy, I get the pharmaceutical literature and I get an offer of counseling. And I think it's time for veterinarians to start doing that. I think they have to realize that the consumer needs information in order to make intelligent decisions. And I have felt like the lady that was talking about the RVT, that the veterinary board and the veterinary association simply shut out the request to consider something about this. I also think that they have to remember that informing the consumer is actually legally protective for veterinarians, because if something goes wrong, they can always say, we warn you that this could happen. So it also helps the veterinarians, not just the consumer. I must say that good veterinarians are very careful with this. But the problem, unfortunately, is that it is not a consistent practice. It's like an option. And I ask you to please amend and adapt the Business and Professions Code to the modern world of medicine. I am not inventing hot water here. The modern world of medicine requires information. And I brought this poster. Maybe the pharmacy board will give me a job for promoting them. It says here some of the items that California requires pharmacists to speak with you every time you get a new prescription. The name of the medicine and what it does. Possible side effects and what you should do if they occur. Whether the new medicine will work safely with other medicines or supplements. And pet owners and guardians and even keepers of pets need that information. I have talked to many pet owners and they ask me, how come they haven't solved this issue? And I tell them, I don't know, I'm gonna ask them. Or I've been asked.
It's a very good question, and we will ask that question. So thank you. That's very informative.
Just a couple of lines? I know that.
I'm sorry, could you?
Can I add just a couple
Of course.
I just want to tell you that I founded a nonprofit that is called the Lizzie Initiative for Pet Protection, when pets are your family, because pets, we consider them our family. In fact, some of them are our only family. And I just want to read 5 lines and then I let others speak.
Thank you.
I wrote here, pet owners and guardians are consumers covered by consumer protection laws and the principles of the Bill of Consumer Rights, which includes the right to be informed. Therefore, veterinarians and veterinary pharmacists who prescribe, supply, and administer medications for pets should be required to provide pharmaceutical literature and counseling on a consistent basis. I appreciate very much that you gave me the honor of expressing these ideas. All this is the legacy of a little dog by the name of Lizzie, and I am sure that it will benefit millions of pets and millions of pet owners and guardians. Thank you very much.